Okay, I'm Erin Somerville at McCallum High School going over two topics, political socialization and voter trends. For political socialization, though, what we did in class was I had y'all get into groups and do this little quiz. So pause this right now and do this. You should have this as a file. So pause now, do your best with it. Okay, the answer key is also attached, but the really important ones to make sure we got is number 1, and this is right here on this title slide. Political socialization is the process by which you develop your ideology. So a lot of folks pick B on number 1. That is what you develop as an ideology after going through this process. The next one that's really important to make sure we have is number 3, that the family is really what determines your political socialization. People are very tempted by the media one. And I understand why, because you might be watching television and you see that the media itself is quite polarized, quite political. If you watch MSNBC, there's such a liberal slant. If you watch Fox News, there's such a conservative slant. But what you need to remember is that you are the one that has the remote. So you decide which one to watch, and you're going to choose which one to watch based on your own already rather developed ideology. Now, does the media influence you? Absolutely. It reinforces your line of thinking. If you are a liberal, it is frustrating to watch Fox News. If you are a conservative, it's frustrating to watch MSNBC. You watch the things that reinforce your beliefs, and you, at the end of the day, are the one that decides what you will watch, what kind of media you'll take in. Number 5, a lot of people get stuck on that one. The ages of roughly 12, around puberty. And number 8 is just important to know that term, political efficacy. That is the feeling that you have power in politics, that when you are exercising your civic duty, that it means something, that it actually has an effect on the political system. Those, if you picked D on this one, I understand why. Those who have a sense of political efficacy tend to then, in turn, have a sense of civic duty. If they feel like their vote matters, then they feel that there's a responsibility to vote. When you don't feel like your vote matters, the responsibility goes away. Okay, so that's political socialization. Doing that quiz, thinking about it, is really the lesson rather than having a lengthy lecture or read the chapter in the textbook. Our real topic today is voter trends. So we're going to look at a number of diagrams, write down some conclusions, and we did that in class discussing. At the end, you look at data to do an activity. You won't be able to do that activity, but I'll still have the data uploaded so you can take that in. Okay, so this first chart, this first graph here, data is being used, but what data is used and how it's presented is up to the person who creates this, the author. And so the way the data is put together, it's supposed to deliver a message. And the question here is, what is the message? The title gives part of it away, age and political knowledge. What's tricky about this one is the x-axis is not time. Generally when you see something like this, the x-axis is time. Time is marked by these lines. So this is one point in time, 1972. This is another point in time, 2008. The x-axis are age groups and the percent that they got correct on when answering political knowledge questions. So what you should put down are the general conclusions that the author of this wanted you to get. Now the author doesn't make up the data, but they decide what data to use and how to present it to you. So the first big thing you should pull out is the red lines above the blue line. So in 1972, people across all age groups knew more than people in 2008. Another thing you can pull here is in 2008, the older you are, the more you know. So I think those are the two main conclusions. You might notice some other things. It's worth it to pause and add any details you'd like. But the question now has to be, what explains this trend? Why do people in 2008 know less than people in 1972? And the second question is, why in 2008 do young people know significantly less than older people in that same year? So pause this, get down as many ideas as you can. I don't have a single answer to this. Sometimes I hear that in 1972 life was more exciting, politics was more important, there was a big war, the Vietnam War. And that doesn't register for me because in 2008 you have 2 wars. You have an economic collapse. You do have civil rights issues. They might not be the same civil rights you're talking about, but there are still world and national and local events that matter in people's lives. So yes, sometimes there's this idea that in the 70s there was more going on. I disagree. Also, people say that, there wasn't as much to know in 1972. I'll tell you, there were not as many news outlets. There weren't as many ways to get your news. In 1972, you had 3 channels, and your news was on maybe 30 minutes or an hour a day. If you weren't home at 5:30 or 10 o'clock, you missed the news. In 2008, you can get the news anytime in a number of forms. So you would assume that in 2008, people would be more informed, having access to more information. This here maybe answers the question. It's not a full answer. You might not think it's a great answer. It's an answer that explains part of it to me. This is, in 2008, the top searches. This is the week before the presidential debate between McCain and Obama. So a major election, an exciting election, and these were the top searches. It looks like Americans weren't really searching very much politically relevant news or trying to research the candidates themselves at all. You have Sarah Palin, the VP for McCain, and her kid. But the rest of the stuff is not very important as far as understanding our politics. Maybe the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy is an important search, but it's not even, in the top 10. So I guess what you might need to see from this is perhaps people are distracted. While there's access to more information, people aren't choosing to seek out political information. They're choosing to seek out whatever you call this, pop culture. And maybe this attracts younger people more than older people. And that could best explain the last diagram. Okay, pause it, write down some notes. And the conclusions you're supposed to have drawn. People 65 and over vote a whole lot more than people 18 to 24. They both have this trend of up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and you need to be able to explain that. The peaks are presidential elections. Every 4 years, there's an election for the president. Is that the only thing on the ballot? Absolutely not. Every 2 years, we have congressional elections. So these little marks down here mark a congressional election. It just happens that every other one of those is a presidential election, and voter turnout goes up for both groups. It goes up more for young people. So these valleys, these low points, these elections have a name. They're called midterm elections because they're in the middle of the president's term. So what explains this gap? Jot down some small list. And the ones I think you should have is maybe older people, because we know at least in 2008 they're more informed. When you are more informed and you understand politics more, it's easier to vote. Those ballots that you have to complete when you vote are really lengthy, and they're full of offices and people that you don't necessarily know when you're young. But understanding the political process and understanding politics around you is something that develops over time as you age. So people 65 and over are more informed, and so they have more of a reason to vote. Whereas if you look at a ballot and you don't know what's on it, then you're not very inspired to vote. You might also say people 18 to 24 are very busy with college. So you might think young people are busier than older people. That might be an ageist assumption, but perhaps people 18 to 24 do have less time than people 65 and over. And then some people say young people don't vote because they feel like their vote doesn't matter. And I think you should write that down, that maybe your vote doesn't matter. You're not wrong. And here's why you're not wrong. Your vote doesn't matter if you don't vote. So politicians need votes to win. And they win votes when they deliver policies that benefit you. So if older people vote, they're going to be able to get politicians to protect their interests. So lots of money is spent on Social Security and Medicare. That is an interest for this group, and they protect it by going out and voting. These younger folks here, they might not feel like the government does much for them because the government doesn't. Your elected politicians don't have to take care of this base if it's not a base that votes. So young people, if you want your vote to matter, you have to go vote. This one, quick one, just to get down the title. It's pretty apparent by this point. Turnout to vote does increase with age. The older you get, the more likely you are to vote until it becomes hard for you to get out of your house and vote. And then this older group of people might also have more trouble voting in states that have photo ID requirements, even if they voted every 2 years at the same precinct. If they have an expired license, they might no longer have the required photo identification to vote. Okay, pause this, take down your own conclusions, and then on your own, you should explain why this matters. Why does it matter that the more family income you have, the more likely you are to participate? What does that mean for our democracy, for how our government works, and for how our politicians work? Okay, so take down a note, pause this. Next one. Okay, so this one has a whole lot of stuff. You can see the blue line represents people who affiliate Democrat, the red line, how people affiliate Republican. I'm going to go up the chart on some of these. What you notice is men are rather evenly split, maybe leaning these days a little more Republican, but pretty evenly split. So can you judge a book by its cover for any of these? No, but these give us an idea where in large groups, statistically, how these groups go. What is important here is the this chart, these two bars for women. There's something called the gender gap. It refers to the gap between how men and women vote, particularly how women favor the Democratic Party. Doesn't mean every woman you meet is a Democrat. There's plenty of female Republicans. But it means if you had a room full of 1,000 women and you said Democrats to the left, Republicans to the right, one side of the room would be more packed than the other. And that is significant in our political process because women make up half the country, and they're more likely to vote. So this is most concerning for Republicans. Okay, so make sure you know the term gender gap, showing the gap between how men and women vote, women leaning Democrat. Other ones that I think are interesting, and you can pause to really look at these in depth, but the wealthy, over 100,000, do lean Republican, which you probably would have predicted. What I don't think you would have predicted is how it's not a huge gap, that there are plenty of wealthy Democrats, your Oprah Winfrey's, your Warren Buffett's. So it's not a safe assumption to assume that the very rich are Republican. I mean, it's an overall statistically true statement, but it's not by a huge margin. What is by a huge margin is how the poor vote. So if you make less than $20,000, you significantly lean Democrat. There are still very poor Republicans, just not nearly as many as Democrats. I don't like this term here, evangelical. I think it's better to put Protestant. I think that's really what's meant by it. And white Protestant lean Republican by a good amount. That's significant because this country is still a majority white Protestant. That majority is shrinking, but it is still a majority white Protestant. White Catholic. So Catholics, like Protestants, they're Christian. They take Jesus to be their savior. But there's a slight voting difference. And so you'll notice white Catholics do lean a little more Democrat than Republican. Jews significantly lean Democratic. Hispanic too, but there are still Republican Jews. And there are Hispanic populations that tend to vote Republican. All of these terms are not well defined at this point. Hispanic is one. And because there are different Hispanic communities, this leaves out Puerto Ricans having a different political culture than Cubans from Mexican. But for the sake of a generalization, statistically do lean Democrat. And then African American would be the most loyal group to the Democratic Party. That's not a function of Obama in 2008. That is a trend really since the 60s, starting in the 30s with FDR and then solidifying by the 60s. So that's your most loyal group to the Democratic Party. But again, there are black Republicans. Do not judge books by their covers. We have in the current presidential primary in the Republican Party, Ben Carson. So, okay, now, becoming minority majority. This shows demographically our country, and you'll notice that Native American, very low population, holding solid, very low. Asian American and African American lower. African American is kind of stable throughout. Asian American is rising, and it will continue rising, but not at the same rate as Hispanic. And white here is decreasing because this is a zero-sum game when we're talking about percentage. So this trend of this rising Hispanic population is referred to as becoming minority majority, meaning that they are a minority and soon to be in a majority. What this means for us now, we're not really going to go through the causes of this. There are many demographic explanations for the causes, but more importantly for the effect on the political process. All these people, represented by these lines, are voters. And politicians need votes to win. And when they win the power, they will provide policies to these voters. So both parties do have to pay attention to this. And so right now we see Hispanic voters as a big block of voters that, while the Democratic Party has, according to last chart, secured pretty well, the Republican Party is really trying to secure the Hispanic vote in order to continue to be a relevant party. So both parties have to pay attention to the groups in the country that vote and how they vote and what kinds of policies they want, because ultimately this might be a two-party country, two parties that win, but they still need to appeal to so many diverse voters in order to actually win the power to deliver the policy that will benefit the most voters. And our last term is respective slides. Respective voting. This is the idea that voters, when they do go in to vote, that they're not necessarily voting based on what candidates have said or current issues, but they might be voting more on a feeling that they have about the country over the past few years. If you feel like the country is doing well, so if the economy is doing well and you feel it, you feel like everyone is doing well, then you're going to probably support the party that's in power. If the economy is not doing so well, and you're feeling that squeeze, then you're going to vote for the other party. This type of voting applies particularly to independent voters. I think I might have skipped that slide. This one. Independent voters. So you have the blue line, Democrats, people who claim to be Democrat and probably vote that way, Republicans claiming to vote that way. And you see this rising yellow line of independents. Many Americans are leaving the two parties. That trend of leaving the two parties is called de-alignment. So remember, realignment was shifting groups in the parties that kind of redefine the party. De-alignment refers to the rejection of both major parties. And those people who are de-aligned tend to call themselves independents. And so to a politician, it often is the independents who decide the elections. Democrats probably are going to vote Democrat. Republicans are going to vote Republican. It's the independents who are the ones in the middle that are swayable. We call them our swing voters. And they often use retrospective voting to make their decisions. So in the campaign discourse, you're going to hear a lot of discussion about what the economy is like today. How is life today, knowing that so many people use retrospective voting to make to cast their ballot. So for the remainder of class, we did this activity. You need not worry about it. But in doing that activity, we looked at this data. So I have that data attached, and you should look over it to notice the trends of how people vote, and that reinforces some of the learning we just did. Okay, that is it for voting trends and political socialization.